Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Cabinet meeting. My name is Councillor Millie. I'm the leader of the Council, and I'll be chairing this meeting today. I'd like to welcome members of the public who may be joining us online today, and of course, Cabinet members and other councillors who are in the room and online. First of all, I'm going to hand over to Claire, our Democratic Services Officer, who's going to go over the housekeeping for today's meeting.
Thank you, Leader. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and the mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning the volume down completely on laptops and turning off microphones. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so we'll move on to agenda item 1, which is apologies, and I can say we've got none received and everyone is present. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. So I've got 2 here to declare. They're both non-pecuniary. The first one is that I founded and I voluntarily chair the Branxham and Rossmore Community Fridges, which is a community food project based in Branxham Library and Rossmore Library, and that relates to agenda item 8. And similarly, I should also mention that I run the Field Close Community Defibrillator Fundraising Committee, which looks after a defib in the BCP Field Close housing scheme, which is in my ward and relates to agenda items 11, 12 and 13. Are there any others? Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm declaring interest as a member of the Friends of Camford Heath Library, item 8. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see anyone else indicating. I will also just mention that as a director of Dorset LEP, that I'll be leaving the room for that item. Okay, so agenda item 4, public issues. There haven't been any petitions. Oh, sorry, we're on to agenda item 3. I've skipped over agenda item 3, which is the confirmation of minutes. Councillor Moore, I think you're going to propose this item. Is there someone to second this one?
I'm quite happy to second that, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Can I see if there's unanimous agreement that everything is okay with the minutes? Oh,
Sorry, I'd like to just put in an amendment to add page 15, the second paragraph, and to insert the word surface in front of car parks. Thank you.
thank you, Councillor Moore. Could you mind just explaining a tiny bit more about what that relates to?
The resident card, it applies to BCP surface car parks.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Can I see if there's agreement for those amended minutes? Yeah, everyone is in agreement. Thank you. Right, agenda item 4 then is public issues. There haven't been any petitions, questions or statements submitted. Agenda item 5 is recommendations from overview and scrutiny committees, which are not otherwise included on the agenda. I will just flag that Councillor Rigby has been in touch. He sent his apologies for this meeting, but he does have a recommendation from Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee on plant-based and reduced meat and dairy diets to be presented to us. However, as he can't be here today, he's going to come and present it to us at the next meeting. In the meantime, Councillor Hadley is aware and will be giving a response at that meeting. Right, can I see if Councillor Kate Salmon, Councillor Canavan, Councillor Carl Brown, I can't see anyone indicating, so we will move on to agenda item 6, which is the medium-term financial plan. Councillor Cox is going to be presenting this item. Can I see if there's someone to second it?
Yes, Chair, happy to second that paper and the additional recommendations that have come forward.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Cox, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. The report really aims to ensure that the Council presents a legally balanced budget for 26-27 and provides an update on the Council's medium-term financial plan, the MTFP. It highlights the ongoing financial challenges, especially to do with the dedicated schools grant deficit and the Council's efforts to seek government assurance on the cash flow within the statutory framework. The report also details the responses to 2 government consultations, the Local Government Fair Funding Review and the Modernising and Improving of the Administration of Council Tax. The Council's MTFP covers a 3-year period to March 28, with a 4.99 council tax increase in 25-26 and subsequent years. The council, the current year budget requires 9.6 million of annual savings and a significant reduction which is a significant reduction from the previous year. There is a target of £19 million in capital receipts from assets disposals to fund the transformation projects, and the council continues to suffer from the increased employers' national insurance costs, which consume a large proportion of our council tax increases. The major risks and challenges in terms of the MTFP, clearly the DSG deficit is the principal risk, where we had a forecasted shortfall of £57.5 million in 25-26 and a cumulative deficit of 165.5 million to March 26. Temporary borrowing is being covered to cover excess send expenditure. The Council's reserves, whilst improved, are still insufficient to cover the DSG deficit. Other risks include things like the pay awards, the council tax base, legal claims, uncertainty from the macroeconomic factors, and the need for further savings and efficiencies. The Council is using scenario planning and sensitivity analysis to manage uncertainty, with potential funding gap of up to £44 million for 26-27 in the worst case scenario. However, services have been asked to develop a £13.3 million in savings for 26-27 with ongoing review and refinement. Additional resources are being allocated to ICT and business analysis to support cross-cutting savings and the continuous improvement programmes. The DSG deficit continues to grow, with in year likely to be more like £57 million and a cumulative deficit of £180 million. Legislation does not allow interest on the DSG deficit borrowing to be charged outside of the general fund, and council tax flexibility for high needs is unlikely. And that's why I'm going to propose a couple of extra recommendations so that the leader and the CEO write to the Minister of Education and Local Government, demanding that actually, that we have a meeting to sort out how we actually finance this without actually going into the general fund. And I'm also asking, as a second additional point, that the MPs write and back the leader and CEO up in terms of that matter. So really, I want to finish really by just going through the recommendations, and those are that we should acknowledge the progress in addressing the funding gap for 26-27, endorse the latest position in developing the budget and the MTFP, note the updates on government conversations regarding the DFG deficits and the impact on council sustainability, and continue to express our significant concern about the existential challenge posed by insufficient cash to fund the SEND service. So the new recommendations, which I'm hoping will be seconded as well, it's already been seconded, I think, by Councillor Brown, are that the leader and the CEO to write to the Ministers of Education and Local Government to demand a meeting to resolve how BCP finances the DFG deficit in such a way as the Council's general fund is not affected. And also, secondly, to ask the BCP's local MPs to write in support of the above. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. So this item was considered by Overview and Scrutiny Board. So I was just going to see if Councillor Salmon, if you wanted to come in at this point on this one.
Hello, yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Leader, and good morning. Good morning, everybody. As the leader just said, we did consider this report at our October ONS board meeting, and there is a recommendation that was put forward during that process. It is, I will explain sort of how it's come about. So as you may be aware, as part of this year's budget scrutiny work, the overview and scrutiny function held a day of budget conversations earlier this month. And the purpose of these was to take a bit of a more detailed look at and specifically chosen areas of the council's budget in order to understand where the choices are around spending and saving and income generation in each case. Those sessions took place just before the last ONS board meeting. So it was agreed that board members could, if they wished, raise any budget related recommendations that might have arisen from the budget conversation sessions as part of this agenda item. So in the event, one recommendation was raised and supported by a majority of the board, and that is that the Overview and Scrutiny Board recommend to Cabinet that as part of the budget setting process, consideration be given to utilising receipts from existing surplus asset disposal programme for 26-27 to address some of the repairs and maintenance of publicly facing assets. This recommendation was put forward largely with reference to the need for capital investment in our library buildings, which is significant at an estimated 1.8 million for, oh, please forgive me, I have background noise. Bear with me one moment. Sorry about that. So the recommendation was put forward largely with reference to libraries, where there's a significant estimated £1.8 million spend needed for essential repairs and building maintenance works across the library buildings. However, the board felt that a broader recommendation in relation to publicly facing assets was preferable in order to encompass other areas of need across departments and services. Since that meeting, I've personally reflected, for example, on the budget presentation we received regarding the plan for play, during which officers noted that one of the key challenges is finding sufficient revenue funding to carry out basic ongoing maintenance of play equipment. A robust maintenance programme would actually prolong the life of the equipment, bringing financial benefits in reduced capital expenditure through less frequent need for wholesale replacement. So given that the government's flexible use of capital receipts scheme has been extended to 2030, there is an opportunity here to, over the next few years, to consider using income from asset disposals in this way as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. Right, are there any other councillors who are not on Cabinet who wish to speak on this item? I can't see any indications. Right, over to Cabinet. Councillor Hadley.
I guess just responding to the plan for play thing, and Councillor Moore might want to as well. There is a bit of a challenge in using. I thought the flexible use of capital receipts was for transformation, but using it for maintenance, and we are doing some backlog as part of the plan for play, and working on restoring those facilities that we can in the parks that we're not otherwise changing. But as an ongoing basis, I'm not sure I need the finance director to advise in terms of whether that's a reasonable use of capital receipts. Thank you.
Can I go to Adam Richards?
Okay, and just for the tape, my name is Adam Richards. I'm the Council's Director of Finance. When it comes to the flexible use of capital receipts, the first thing I need to identify, in order to even start that conversation, you have to sell assets. And therefore you have to then have a capital receipt, which then council can have a discussion around actually on what priorities is then applied. If you're going to apply it to something that is traditionally of a revenue nature, you can apply the flexible use of capital receipts, but on the condition that you have a clearly defined saving that it will deliver the council on an ongoing basis. And therefore a business case that demonstrates that has to be set out to full council for its consideration.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hadley, did you want to add anything at that point? No. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Leader. I was actually going to respond to Councillor Cox with the MTFP. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I was just going to say that in addition to SEND problems, we all know the funding of social care takes the largest slice of this council's budget. And of course, social care is totally essential statutory service. But when councils must fund care packages costing over £1 million for one person, I really don't think council tax was designed to pay for costs like this. But sadly, the government decided the funding of social care needs yet another review. And unfortunately, the broken SEND system is going exactly the same way, with the promised white paper being delayed until spring 2026. So many councils like ours are now being severely financially challenged thanks to government decisions. And these same decisions are causing all manner of problems for schools, for parents, and worst of all, are failing our most vulnerable children. And all because the government funding we receive for SEND does not meet the needs of our children. So yeah, I am happy to support the recommendations with the 2 amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of comments as seconder of this for these recommendations. And just coming back to the point raised a moment ago about flexible use of capital receipts, well, I don't disagree with the recommendation about investing in our sort of capital infrastructure, whether that be libraries, play facilities, seafront services, whatever it be. I think the finance director is correct that we need to actually sell assets and get capital receipts to do that. And a large amount of that in terms of the flexible use of capital receipts will be used for our ongoing transformation work. You know, we've already got calls on that in terms of adult social care fulfilled lives transformation, and later this morning, you know, we've got the paper on adult social care prevention strategy, and that is looking to be funded through the flexible use of capital receipts. So we do need to sell assets to fund our ongoing transformation work. If there's sufficient after that, then, you know, I think it's worthy of consideration. But I think we do need to make sure we're not saying, well, we're going to be maintaining our play areas, but, oh, we can't transform the way the council works because of that, because that's not going to work for us long term. And we need to be doing our ongoing transformation projects to manage the sort of cost pressures of the council long term. Just in terms of the overall MTFP report, I was particularly interested when it talks about the government's fair funding review. And paragraphs 7 and 8 talk about reductions in the number of different government grants and which ones are likely to be included and rolled into the revenue support grant, which I think, you know, it's crying out for simplification, because there are too many of these sort of a grant for this and a grant for that, that actually, you know, we just need to know overall where we are. But I've been around long enough to sort of know that governments tend to roll different grants within the revenue support grant. And then the next year we'll have a couple of % reduction in the revenue support grant. And then the next year we'll erode it a bit more, and we'll erode it a bit more and a bit more. And I am concerned when we're talking about the £39.5 million social care grant potentially being rolled into the RSG, the £7.6 million adult social care market sustainability and improvement grant. You know, these grants are actually funding some fantastic work within the council. But if they go into the revenue support grant, and if they're then eroded over the years, sort of invisibly, that really does concern me, because it's going to make it really difficult for us to sort of balance our budget and to deliver the services that residents expect if that revenue support grant is eroded over time. So that really does concern me. The other point that concerns me is also listed there about the £3.3 million Employers National Insurance Contributions grant possibly being rolled into the revenue support grant. Now, I don't think that gets as much airtime as it deserves, actually. I get a lot of residents say to me or contact me to say, but we're paying more council tax every year. Where are the better services? Where's the improved services? Well, government are making us pay over £5 million a year direct employers' national insurance as a council, and giving us 3.3 million to cover that. So we're nearly 2 million short, on top of the additional costs that we've had in terms of paying care agencies and other contractors and service providers, because they're having to fund additional employers' national insurance for their organisation. So more than the 2 million, we're probably talking 3, 4, 5 million pounds a year of our council tax is actually now just being passported straight up to government in terms of additional employers' national insurance. So when people say to me, well, what are you doing with our council tax? We're giving you more every year. Well, actually, government are siphoning a load of it off of us in terms of employers' national insurance. And they're just taking it away and they're doing what they do at national government level. So I don't think a lot of people realise that actually government have massively increased the tax burden on councils, and a lot of their council tax each year is just to fund the increased tax burden that local authorities are now facing from government. I think that's really important to remember, especially in our conversations with local MPs, because they seem to be asking us to do an awful lot more and criticising us when we can't afford to do things. Well, you're siphoning 2, 3, 4, 5 million pounds a year off of us in an increased tax burden. So address that, and then maybe we can start talking about doing additional things.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'd just like to say I totally support this paper and the 2 amendments. Now, we always seem to be talking about the high needs block deficit every time we get a finance paper come here, and it sort of becomes sort of almost a broken record, doesn't it? But the crack is getting louder, isn't it? This is the big thing. Now, you know, we all know that the statutory override, we're not allowed, even if we could afford to pay it off, if we had the money available, we're not allowed by statute to actually pay it off. And yet it seems bizarre that we still have to fund the interest from the council tax. So we're sort of like, you know, the devil in the deep blue sea, aren't we? The Send White Paper, well, I'm on record to my disappointment that it's not come through in the autumn like it was promised. I do totally understand the reasons why we've been given that it has been delayed, because there's so much work to be done here. However, it puts us as a local authority, with most other local authorities in the country, actually in a very difficult position, because we're not being told what we can do to actually get us through that. Plus, of course, you know, it sort of puts us in a position of limbo, and also a lot of children and young people as well, because you know we want clarity about the way this is going to go forward, not just for the finance bit, but also for improving services. So I just repeat, I totally support anything we can do to get the government to understand our situation, and for them to give some suggestions about what we can do.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. I'm going to come to Councillor Martin and then on to Councillor Hannah.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I don't suppose it will be any surprise that I would love to see some capital spending on our library infrastructure. Some of it's in a dire state, some of it is really urgent. And obviously we are talking about the library strategy in a little bit further down the agenda, and that is sort of part of the background about the library strategy. And I know there was quite a big discussion at scrutiny about it. So I fully support that. And actually, more generally about our assets, investing in our assets, and obviously we've mentioned about transformation. I know we are putting aside some capital to assist the Lighthouse, for example, in seeking renewal funding from the Arts Council of several £1 million. And when we come to the library strategy, you will see that one of the aspirations, if you like, is potentially further down the line that our libraries become national portfolio organisations with the Arts Council, which unlocks a lot of funding that we don't already have. So I think that would be a really important step forward, and I would wholeheartedly support that. Again, not a surprise. My other point is really a question to Councillor Cox. I'm not sure whether he will be able to answer it or not, which is, you know, the amendment amended, or the added recommendation is to ask our local MPs to support discussions and lobbying. Obviously, we have 3 Labour MPs, and I wonder whether you have any kind of overview of what they are already doing or have already done in terms of advocating for BCP in terms of our dire financial situation, particularly in relation to SEND, but in terms of financial settlement more generally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Leader. I also wanted to support Councillor Cox's additional recommendations and have to apologise for the fact that I may simply be underlining some of the things that Councillor Burton has said a moment ago. I had hoped that I would get in first, knowing the kind of comments that he would make. But I think it is absolutely ridiculous that we are having to borrow in order to fund SEND. That in itself is absolutely ridiculous. But then the fact that we have to meet the interest payments from our general fund, interest payments which I now understand total some £9 million a year, is even more ridiculous. Those interest payments should be rolled up into the borrowing, and government should in due course sort out how all the borrowing for all of the councils involved is dealt with. And not kicking things into the long grass, as Councillor Moore has said. That 9 million means reductions in other services that we ought to be providing our residents, because we're having to spend that money on interest payments, on borrowing that we shouldn't have in the first place. So I totally support those additional recommendations. I particularly like the wording where we are not simply going to request a meeting, but we are going to demand a meeting. That is the appropriate terminology. And I also totally support the second part of the recommendation, which is to ask our local MPs to write in support of this case. I do find it disappointing that some of our local MPs take the opportunity to criticise this council for one thing or another, but very rarely do I see them defending this council and putting forward our case against the government and the way in which the government is doing things. And that's not simply on the SEND issue, but it is, as has already been mentioned, the national insurance issue as well. So I would like to see them get behind the council, support what needs to be done, not for this council's sake, but for the sake of our residents, who they represent as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this item? I was just going to speak before I hand back over to Councillor Cox to sum up, and just wanted to reflect on the fact that this was a historic decision by the Conservative government to introduce SEND provision, probably with the best will in the world, but without identifying sustainable funding to actually deliver it. And over 10 years now, the deficit has accumulated and accumulated to the point where it's now £6 billion nationally. And often I see things the government are making announcements on, for example, digital ID cards, which I think is very concerning, but will cost billions of pounds. And my biggest frustration with this is that, you know, we have this broken SEND system that puts local families under an immense amount of stress, along with our council budget being under stress. But I'm not seeing any urgency from government to actually sort this out. And yes, Councillor Moore, you're correct. They're going to go back out to try and get this right. And Councillor Burton, you said so as well. But, you know, I want to know what they've been doing for a year. £6 billion of a national deficit in one area, which is continually creating revenue pressures in local authority budgets, and local authorities, of course, deliver some of the most important services that residents really rely on. And I think it's massively concerning for all communities what they could lose because this issue hasn't been sorted. I was just going to add that I'd met with the MPs on Friday along with the CEO, and that was after the announcement of the delay in the SEND reforms. We made it very clear about what that means, not only for local families, but also for the sustainability of the council and our funding situation. But I agree with Councillor Cox. I think we need to follow up with some very robust demands to the MPs and to government about what this will leave in our communities in terms of non-statutory services. Right, I'm going to hand back over to Councillor Cox to sum up.
Thank you, Leader. I've not really much else to add, except to correct Councillor Andy. to actually to say that we do not have 3 Labour MPs. We have 2 Labour MPs, 1 independent now. But I would expect all MPs, no matter what their colour, is to get behind the council and do what's right.
In that case, I just apologise to that relevant member. I simply can't keep up with the number of people who keep moving from one political party to something else.
Thank you. Right, so we'll take a vote on this. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendations in the paper? Wonderful, that's unanimous. Okay, so on to agenda item 7, which is the Upton Park Farm and the surrender of the lease. Councillor Cox is going to be
Also, you were voting on those additional recommendations.
Oh, yes, I'm very happy to confirm that we voted on those additional recommendations for that item, for the MTFP item. Okay, so agenda item 7 is Upton Park Farm and the surrender of the lease. Councillor Cox is going to be presenting this one. Can I see if there's someone to second? Councillor Hadley, thank you very much. Over to you, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Leader. The report proposes that BCP Council agrees to the surrender of the lease of Upton Park Farm, subject to specialist agricultural legal advice. The primary purpose of the report is to acquire the land south of the A35 for habitat mitigation. For the purposes of clarity and to provide an update for the surrender of the Upton Park Farm lease, it is now proposed to amend the financial strategy slightly. The strategic community sill levy for habitat mitigation will only be used to fund the land acquired to the south of the A35. The Council's capital receipt resources will be used to fund the land to the north of the A35, and those buildings deemed surplus to requirements with these resources will then replenish from the disposal of the acquired buildings deemed surplus to requirements. For absolute reassurance, no decision is being made via this report as to how the acquired land north of the A35 will be used. As such, any such use will need to be considered as part of the future report to Cabinet and to Council as appropriate. Recommendations is for the Cabinet to approve the purchase of the farm business tenancy on terms approved by the Director of Finance in consultation with the portfolio holder for finance. Just to give Cabinet a bit of background, in 2024, the tenant expressed interest in surrendering the lease. A financial offer was made in August 25. The terms were negotiated that are considered to be best consideration. The farm is currently let on a farm business tenancy since June 2014, with about 40 years left on it. The property includes a farmhouse, 3 cottages, various farm buildings, and 36.3 hectares of land. We basically have 2 options. One is to just carry on as normal and reject the offer, keep the tenancy. And the second is to agree to surrender the tenancy and accept the offer and regain control of the property, which is obviously the recommended option. So the key considerations really is that we need to make sure is that the council is required to obtain best consideration for asset transfers. An independent RICS valuation has been obtained. The BCP Council is responsible for the ongoing maintenance costs. Recently, we've spent £35,000 and there's a further 415,000 identified to be spent. The current rent is low and difficult to increase due to the lease terms. Some of the land lies outside of BCP's boundary. It's within Dorset County Council, and most of the land is designated for proposed heathland mitigation or falls within 400 metres of heathland buffer zone. So I'd really like to recommend to the council the 2 items that are there at the beginning, which were that we note the recommendations of the cross-party strategic asset disposal working group on the 19th of September. We approve the purchase of the farm business tenancy at Upton Park Farm on such terms as approved by the Director of Finance and myself. And then there's an additional recommendations that are to approve the funding for the purchase of the land south of the A35, which equates to approximately 18.4% of the market value, which will come from the Community Infrastructure Levy, Habitats Site Mitigation. And fourthly, to approve the funding of the purchase of the land north of the A35, which equates to 81.6% of the market value from capital receipts, with those to be replenished by the receipts from the disposal of those acquired buildings deemed surplus to requirements. And finally, to approve the disposal of those acquired buildings deemed surplus to requirements. There you go.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. So I'm just going to highlight that there is a confidential appendix with this paper. So if any councillors want to refer to that one, just let me know and we'll go into the confidential session. Can I see if there are any councillors in the room or online who wish to speak on this item?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I've turned an interest to speak. We did speak on email. It's Councillor Butt. Thank you.
Councillor Butt, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I wish to place on public record the deep concern of my residents regarding the future of Upton Park Farm. To be clear and absolutely clear, no one is opposing the surrender of the current lease. We fully respect the rights and decisions of the existing tenant. However, once that lease ends, and that may be today, the land returns unfettered to full BCP Council ownership as a valuable community asset. Its potential use will demand transparency, integrity and meaningful involvement with my community, I believe, from the very start. The land, particularly north of the A35, holds real importance for those I represent in Creekmore. It's not simply a parcel of land, it's part of our local character and identity and a place our residents care deeply about. Understandably, there's deep anxiety about what may come next. We've seen previous scoping exercises float ideas from the football stadium to more recently a potential waste depot within the report. Yet none have been properly owned, explained or consulted upon. These uncertainties leave residents feeling that decisions are being made about them, not with them. I'm sure you'll understand that. Therefore, I'm certain the Cabinet will agree that we must ensure that any future consideration of the site begins with open dialogue and genuine collaboration with residents, ward councillors and local stakeholders who are engaged from the very start. When the time comes to consider the site's future, my community must surely be recognised and utilised as the local knowledge and skill set that it is. People who understand the land, the infrastructure and the environment, and also the sensitivities of the area, which is most important. Harnessing that insight will be essential to achieving a sound, sustainable, mutually beneficial outcome for everyone involved. I must also express concern that the Working Party reviewing asset disposals did not include Creekmore Ward councillors in its discussions. This omission effectively excludes not only elected representatives, but also the residents whose lives and environment are most directly affected by any future use of the site. So therefore, for all future meetings, it would be mutually beneficial to invite relevant ward councillors to attend these Working Party meetings, to question and contribute at the same, ensuring that local knowledge and community insight are embedded from the outset. Chair, this is not a protest against the surrender of the lease. It's a proactive and protective stance for the future of a site that has a direct bearing on the Creekmore community. And while the land north of the A35 is held in ownership by BCP Council on behalf of all residents, it sits fully within Creekmore, and any change in its use will be felt most keenly here. It is therefore paramount that the Creekmore community is fully involved in shaping its future use, not as an afterthought, but as a proactive partner in achieving a balanced, collaborative and well-considered outcome that avoids detriment and works in the best interests of everyone. The way we move forward clearly indicates how we value and work with our communities. Let's ensure that in the case of Upton Park Farm, especially the land north of the A35, that the next chapter is written with my residents, not without them. Thank you, Madam Chairman, for listening. I'm entirely grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Leader. Just for clarity, I chaired the meeting of the cross-party asset disposal working group when we considered this. And I think it's important for me to thank Councillor Cox for ensuring that the cross-party group did actually look at it. He didn't need to do that. You know, we usually have the job of looking at disposal of stuff, so it made a refreshing change to actually think about buying stuff, which was nice. But I just want to reassure Cabinet that in my view, it is not the job of the cross-party asset disposal working group to consider what that land might be used for. It's not our role. Our role is to consider whether it's appropriate. You know, do the figures add up? So if we even when we sell assets, the first consideration is this thing that we're selling, this bit of land, this property that we're selling, is it possible for BCP to use that for any other purposes? That's usually our starting point when we consider that. This is completely different situation. So we have an opportunity here to purchase this land, or to take control of this land, and use it for whatever we consider it to be used for. So this is the start, I suspect, of a very lengthy process in terms of what we might be able to do in the future. So I absolutely respect Councillor Butt's view, and I think it will be important later on to ensure that the community is consulted. But this is very early days in my view, and it's not the role of the cross-party group to get involved with that. So thank you, and I support the recommendation, by the way, just in case you wouldn't.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Any other councillors not on Cabinet wishing to speak? I can't see any. Right, anyone on Cabinets? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, obviously this is a part of Upton Farm, and Upton Park is a great resource for people from the whole of the area, and indeed from people within East Dorset. Councillor Cox corrected Councillor Martin earlier. I need to correct him that Dorset County Council doesn't actually exist anymore. It's Dorset Council, and in the paper it does highlight it as Dorset County Council, which is actually wrong. I think I recognise Councillor Butt's concern. I do think we need to be really careful not to start hares running, and I think there is no intention of it being a waste site. What we're looking at across the whole of BCP is our depots, where we store and maintain our vehicles. And I'm not aware of the detail of exactly. I know there is a paper in draft, and I haven't seen it in terms of those, but I'm assuming that is the intention. So it's not a waste site before people start campaigning on the basis of something that wasn't on plan. Importantly, as Councillor Cox highlighted, much of the area is within 400 metres of heathland, and because unfortunately of incursion by pets, particularly cats, there is no way that's going to be turned into housing. So again, housing, if anything happens, is in the very east of that area, not the whole of that area. So I think we need to be clear about what cannot happen in that space, and have an open dialogue with all parties, including absolutely the Ward Council of Creekmore, but recognising it's a resource for the whole of BCP and beyond. I really welcome the opportunity to try and do the right thing with the park, and also to make sure that the connectivity, particularly for sustainable travel under the bypass, is not very nice. It's right by the road, and this does present an opportunity for that as well to be improved. So I welcome the release of the tenancy, and look forward to trying to make the best for all of our residents in terms of how we use the land that we have as a result. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. I can't see any other indication. So, Councillor Cox, would you like to add anything to this one?
Thank you, Leader. No, I wouldn't like to add anything particularly. Just to say to Councillor Butt that Poole will be able to make representations on behalf for any future developments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so can I take a vote on this item, please? All those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, so we'll move on. We do have agenda item 8 next. However, I'm going to switch the agenda round because Councillor Cox has to leave shortly. We're going to move agenda item 9 up and then come on to agenda item 8. So agenda item 9 is the Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership closure. I'm going to have to leave the room for this one. So I'm going to leave and leave you in Councillor Cox's capable hands, and then I will be back for item number 8.
Thank you, Leader. Just wait for her to leave the room. Do we have a proposer for this item? Councillor Harrod. And I will second.
This is the slightly longer than anyone would like closure of the LEP. When I started in my cabinet role last July, I think we all understood that the closure was going to be quite imminent, but it has dragged on. The government chose to move on from LEPs, which is local enterprise partnerships, just before last year's election, move their functions back into local authorities. Part of that is the establishment of the Growth Board, which in BCP has now had its first 2 meetings, and also look at how the funding left over from the LEPs would be returned to use in communities in line with the vision of the LEPs function. Due to an issue with Modern Gov, which is the system we use to load items onto the internet and into councillors' packs, we do not have the final draft of the report in the packs, so I need to put an amendment into this, which has been circulated. We are accepting a total of £4,640,160.18. The figure on the report is 12p more than that, which might seem a bit drastic to do that, but accuracy is important where we can. We need to adjust the recommendation on page 1 that we accept that this is only subject to the board approving the DLEP accounts for 24 and 25. In paragraph 22 of the report, this is just additional detail. Obviously, at this point, it should state full details of the legal support as laid out in confidential appendix A, which not confidential appendix B. And in paragraph 29, we should reference paragraph 28, not paragraph 20.8. Just so we're all clear. I apologise for the technicalities. Councillor Earle remains one of just 2 directors, which was why she had to leave the room, and she will be resigning from the board once that money is transferred. Dorset Council will complete the process of closing the company down at that point. At this point, we're not looking to make any further decisions on how money will be spent, but it has to be spent in community, economic and growth development purposes. And we will also not receive a large chunk of this money straight away. It will come in stages as some of its repayment on capital loans and other functions that it's coming back, but it will be ring-fenced as mentioned. I also need to emphasise that this money did not come through any funding application. As such, there is no need for this to go to full council to decide to accept it. Obviously, any spending of money has to go through the usual democratic processes. Dorset Council will, if we pass this today, take a similar paper to their Cabinet on December the 9th to continue the process from their perspective, and I'll pause there.
Thank you very much. Councillor, any comments from anybody? Councillor Canavan, do you want to?
It's just really to follow up on the last point that was made about it not coming to council. Just for clarity, I was appointed to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee of the Dorset LEP some time ago. It has very rarely met. It certainly hasn't met to consider this. So I respect the right of Cabinet to make this decision and for it not to go to council, but it has not been subject to any scrutiny at all, certainly not within the ONS committee of the Dorset LEP, or indeed within any of our Overview and Scrutiny committees within BCP. That's not to say I don't support the idea of us taking this money, but what concerns me the most about it is I have a admittedly jaundiced view about the Dorset LEP, or about LEPs generally, and it seems to me that if we're going to replace them with anything, whatever this new thing is, that money ought to be focused on the regeneration of our area to the benefit of the community. So strengthening our ability to regenerate our area to facilitate growth in our community has got to be the ultimate priority for this money. And I understand what Councillor Herriot says, that no decisions have yet been taken, but I because it hasn't been anywhere else through you, Councillor Cox, because it hasn't been anywhere else, I just want to make the point that at some point I think it would be really important to have an open and transparent discussion about what you're going to use that money for, because in my view the absolute top priority must be to do what the LEP was supposed to do, but never has done, and that is to facilitate regeneration in our area. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. I think I share many of your concerns on that, and I think just wanted to emphasise, I think that we've already set up a BCP growth board, which will advise where that money is spent, from my understanding. Any members of Cabinet want to speak on this? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Yes, I guess it follows on really from the concerns raised by Councillor Canavan, because the growth board, again, I haven't seen detail of exactly what that will, the remit of that group, and the LEP had significantly more money than this to spend, and this is just the residue, and it's great to have the residue coming back in, and absolutely, you know, we should accept it with open hands. But there's something about how much money the growth board needs if it's going to be successful going forwards, which I'm not sure I've seen anything that suggests they've got a budget beyond the residue of what the LEP had. So if we're going to deliver the ambitions that Councillor Canavan rightly said around regeneration, but also around community, we do need to work out what are we asking the growth board to do, how much money will they need to do that effectively, and it's not just the fag end of what was left over from the LEP. So that's sort of the next steps perhaps from this paper. Thank you.
Good. Martin.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure people around the table will agree that I'm nothing if not predictable. So it's probably predictable that I would, thank you, that I would mention arts and culture in the context of the growth board, because the chief operating officer, or the joint chief operating officer of Pavilion Dance Southwest, who is also the chair of our own BCP Cultural Compact, is a member of the growth board. And I think that's a really good step forward that she's been put on the board. I think that's a recognition of the importance of arts and culture, and I'm talking about it in the context of economic growth and economic development, because the arts and cultural sector is a huge driver of economic growth and development. And I'm currently working with a number of organisations and the Arts Council to put a paper together about the extent to which arts and culture is a driver for growth and economic development. So I just wanted to say I welcome that, and I just wanted to put a marker down, as I always do when I can. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Anybody else want to speak? I take that to the vote then. Can we all agree recommendations?
Can I wrap up? Thank you for the representations from everyone. I think as we kind of navigate this, it was kind of taken longer than anyone would like, but that's kind of caused some stagnation in the process. The money returned will have to be used for reasons, as I noted in the opening. The Growth Board will potentially have some access to these funds, and there will be any kind of spend there would have to come through the normal process and would come back to Cabinet as part of a report. It has to be community activity, new activity and capacity building supporting businesses. As noted in the confidential appendix, there are some restrictions on how this can be spent in line with the company's formation, but it is ring fenced for those things. The ONS board, Councillor Salmon is welcome to have a look at this. I'd welcome a discussion on how we look to use this money going forward, and so therefore it can come through our scrutiny process, even if it's not gone through the LEPs. And obviously, yeah, and as we kind of go forward, then hopefully we can make that decision in transparently, as Councillor Canavan asked for.
Thank you, Councillor Harriott. Shall we go to the vote now? All those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Okay, so agenda item 8 is the BCP Council Libraries draft strategy. Councillor Martin is going to be presenting and proposing this item. Is there someone to second this one, please? Councillor Moore, thank you. Okay, over to Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Alida. I'll try and be as brief as I can. I am obviously very pleased to introduce this 5-year strategy, which I believe is a strategy of ambition and imagination for our libraries. It's a statement of intent as well. I should say we had a very good overview and scrutiny session on Monday last week with some really positive comments and really great contributions, and I'd like to thank Councillor Salmon for facilitating that. So this is a strategy that recognises the crucial role our libraries play in all our communities, especially in an age when so much of our public life and public realm has disappeared or is broken. And it recognises that our libraries are anchor institutions, safe and neutral places of education, lifelong learning, of creativity, culture, fun, information, support, health and well-being, and so much more. We all know this. And much of the value of libraries is preventative, and so investing in them brings huge returns for our communities. And finally, this is a strategy that relies and will rely on much stronger partnerships with communities, community groups and organisations, and all parts of this authority, every director to help make it work. So adult social care and health, children's, events, cultural development, customer, housing, communities, public health, economic development, and so on. And I was heartened the other day to hear the Chief Executive refer, in the context of a discussion about adult social care, about the clear link between adult social care, our libraries, and culture. I would like to thank Matty Roudsepp, who's here today, Linda Anderson, Head of Libraries, and her team, and Lisa Stutchbury, Head of Consultation, and her team for all the excellent work on this strategy, along with external groups and organisations, particularly in public health and arts and culture, and also to representatives from all political groups on this authority who have all input into the strategy, and I think we've got a good degree of consensus. So just to pick up some of the highlights, we want to retain all 24 of our libraries, and that's a reflection of Cabinet's position, the wider Three Towns Alliance and other political groups. The second point, recognising that Charminster, Hanworthy, Rossmore and Southbourne are large enough to support wider activity as community hubs. Kinston's the model. Point number 3, longer hours with open access technology. Again, Charminster, Southbourne, Rossmore and Hanworthy to pioneer the introduction of open access technology to allow our libraries to be open longer. And we have a bid in with the Arts Council for substantial funding to introduce that technology. So fingers crossed we get that. And we would like to look at extending that to other lesser used libraries as well. There's an arts and culture theme running through the strategy because of the amazing arts and cultural community we have, with many artists and creators looking for venues to perform, showcase and exhibit and draw people in. And we're already working with a range of organisations to deliver this, and actually some really good work is already going on. Funded privately, by the way, not by the authority or by those organisations. There's a public health narrative in the report with ambitions to further our public health goals through the library network, and my thanks to Rob Carroll, to also make the point that libraries can be fully plugged into the creative health strategy being developed by NHS Dorset and a range of partners, including us. There's a lot more, but my final point is, and I mentioned it earlier on, is my personal longer term ambition is for our libraries to become national portfolio organisations, along with some of our cultural organisations that are already NPOs, and that could unlock significant amounts of funding. And there are some brilliant examples around the country of library services that are NPOs and get some substantial funding from the Arts Council. And I'm thinking particularly of St Helens and Gloucester. So I think that's a real ambition of mine. But I may not be around to see it happen, but you never know. There's a lot more I could say, obviously, but I would ask colleagues, and thank Cabinet colleagues for helping and working on this strategy with me the last couple of years. And I would ask colleagues to accept the recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. So this item was considered by Overview and Scrutiny Board. So I was going to see if Councillor Salmon would like to just note what the discussion was and any recommendations.
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. I do have a few things to say. The board was very pleased to receive the draft library strategy at our last meeting, and members were broadly supportive of the plan. There was particular praise for the commitment within the strategy to retaining all 24 branch libraries across the 3 towns, as Councillor Martin has mentioned. There was also a strong interest from the board in the proposals within the strategy relating to the development of further opportunities for income generation within our libraries. And I proposed that we put this specific aspect onto the board's work plan to look at in more detail in the future, once some further work has been undertaken, once there have been, when a few further steps have been taken on that. There was also a lot of interest in the proposals to introduce open access technology in the 4 library locations that Councillor Martin mentioned, and in the grant application that's been submitted to the Arts Council to enable this. One of the recommendations that you have before you from the board relates to this, in that members were keen to ensure that the number of staffed hours available at libraries doesn't reduce as a result, an unintended result of the introduction of open access arrangements going in the future. As I've already mentioned under a previous item this morning, the board also discussed the capital funding needs across the library estate. And out of that discussion, a further recommendation was made, and that was about that the library service put together a list of potential smaller neighbourhood community infrastructure levy bids that could then be made available to councillors and to neighbourhood groups immediately upon the opening of any future SIL rounds. And this would serve to highlight some of the needs of local libraries and make sure that they might be addressed where funds are available to do that from the neighbourhood SIL. Overall, the ONS board supported the recommendations regarding the library strategy as set out in the Cabinet report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. Are there any other councillors who are not on Cabinet wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Carl-Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I just wanted to say a few words. Broadly, I welcome the overview that this strategy gives us. I think there, obviously, we have funding requirements that need to go with it, including the match funding for the open access. But broadly, I clearly support the maintaining the opening of the 24 libraries. And I'm also, from a local point of view, from a ward point of view, very pleased that Charminster has got the recognition it deserves as a key community hub, and that will be developed. And I really just wanted to back up, I think, quite strongly what one of the recommendations in particular from the ONS board around the fact that, you know, we can have as many volunteers as we like and as many friends groups as we like, and we can have the open access. But neither of those things should be replacing people, workers with their skill sets as librarians, their memory of the, you know, the institutional memory that they have of the services and the people. And we saw the importance of libraries, for example, during COVID. You know, one of the things I did during COVID was delivered books to people in the area, and that was, you know, hugely coordinated by libraries such as Charminster, and the reach that the people who've worked there for 20 plus years just have into their communities is not something we can replace with open access or with volunteers, and nor should we seek to do that. And also, I just look forward to the detail around what those hubs will be, what they will look like, and welcome the maintenance funds that will also need to come along to support the ongoing use of libraries like Charminster. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr-Brown. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I too welcome this report. Very pleased to see that we're ensuring that all our libraries are kept open, regardless of use. And I think that's what I want to touch on, the use. We talked about this exciting opportunity for various libraries who have a greater footfall with regard to being hubs. And I wondered, with regard to Creekmore especially, we have a very much community hub where the library is within, anybody who knows Creekmore will know that library is very much within a little hub of shops and church and the pub, etc., and how one could move forward to being a hub. I know that that was touched on, that other areas are to be looked on to become these hubs. I know that Creekmore would be very interested in that, but obviously if it relies on footfall, then there would be some requirement, quite happy for ward councils to assist in working with those involved to increase that footfall so we could indeed become a hub. But whether I could have that conversation perhaps with Andy at some stage, that would probably be useful. And very much support this and look forward to it moving forward. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this who aren't on Cabinet? Nope, I can't see any indications. Over to Cabinet. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Leader. Well, I'm pleased that the strategy recognises that our libraries are important to most of our residents and makes it clear there's far more to libraries than borrowing books, although that's important. That they're safe, neutral, warm and welcoming spaces that can be used by everyone. They're ideal for hosting community activities, meetings and events, perfect for councillor surgeries and great for all children's activities. We can also encourage and welcome greater use by public health, skills and learning, arts and culture colleagues and our communities teams. I'm also very pleased that forming friends groups are central to the strategy and being actively encouraged. And given that we live in financially challenging times, friends groups can help through fundraising to provide useful items for the libraries over and above the basics provided by the council. My Campertese library has had a friends group for many years, and we all know I'm a member. And we funded everything from items of furniture and white goods, children's activities like Zoo Lab, to purchasing daily newspapers. The Echo, of course, just for you, Martin. So funding is currently a challenge. So it's necessary to think outside the box because it's important to remember one of our biggest challenges is managing the costs of our buildings and our inherited PFI liability. So this is a 5-year strategy, but when we start planning for the future, we're also going to need to consider all the new housing developments we're currently being asked to plan for by government and remind ourselves that we're going to need a library service to meet the needs of these new communities. But yes, I'm happy to second this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Hannam.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I do very much welcome this report, and I do want to echo Councillor Martin's appreciation to our council staff who have worked so hard in bringing all of this together. That is greatly appreciated. And I don't know whether it's part of the normal protocol for cabinet meetings, but I think I would also like to express appreciation to Councillor Martin himself for the way in which he has guided this through. I know he's worked very hard on it, and I know that this is an issue dear to his heart. That said, there are a couple of the recommendations that I would like to comment on, largely to welcome and support. There's the little f, which refers to the friends groups and volunteer roles in supporting the library offer. And I think one of the things that should be said is a word of appreciation to those who already volunteer in our libraries for the contribution that they make. And yes, of course, we encourage others to come forward and to contribute in that way as well. I do hear the comments about not to the detriment of our own staffing. I would endorse that. I would like to see that work being over and above what our staffing provides. And then going for my own reasons in reverse order, back to little d and the reference to community hubs. Very much welcome that approach. Libraries should be very much more than about books. We should be providing as many different services to our residents through our libraries as we can, and working up further plans to extend the community hub approach in other libraries, I think is something that we should thoroughly endorse. Moving backwards again to little b, and the use of open access technology, assuming this to be digital technology, I would of course support anything digital. That's part of my role. But I think making libraries accessible at times when they would otherwise be closed is something that is of great importance. I have to admit to some experience of open access technology context of a gym. And I'm delighted that my gym does not close simply because there are no staff there and I can get on and use it. So the same approach in libraries, I think, is also to be welcomed. So all of this I totally support. The one but is with regard to recommendation A, where it rightly recognises that this is an ambitious plan. And that's where I think within Cabinet we need to join dots. And I joined the dot to the previous dot, the medium-term financial plan debate, which we've already had, and the financial pressures which we have, and in particular, the aspects of those financial pressures that are down to government policy. And I'm not making a party political point here because we've had a change of government. We've had government policy in the past and government policy that continues, none of which has supported local authorities in the way that it should. So the concern that I have is if government does not sort out the various pressures that we have already highlighted today in the near future, we are going to find this ambitious plan under pressure. And we could well have a meeting, whether it's next year or the year after, where we are having to consider, can we do all of this, or do we have to make reductions in our library service that we do not wish to make? And that's one of the messages I think we need to get across to our members of Parliament as well, that when we raise those issues of government policy with them, that we underline to them, this is the kind of service that is at risk if we do not sort out those issues. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Some really important points there. Councillor Hadley?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'd like to thank Councillor Martin personally, because I know he's put an awful lot of effort into this in terms of driving this through, and also the team, the libraries and the management. I want to talk a little bit about ambition, because I think there are things that are in the action plan that that I'd love to see more detail on. I think as we go forward, we really need to get into. Councillor Moore already mentioned the Bournemouth PFI, and I think that is a real challenge to us in terms of how much of the money for the library service goes into that one building. And I guess for me, it's also about far more than bricks and mortar. There is the bit about the librarians as fonts of knowledge, as people who will inspire kids to learn to read and know which book to pick off the shelf for them, and encourage them in ways that supplement and support the parents in doing that, and self-service doesn't deliver that. But the building stock is very variable and in need of quite significant repair. And I know as a cabinet and as the Three Towns Alliance, we had an ambition to try and look at more holistically at buildings in locations and say which one of these is the best hub. And partly because we've had to, because the way you have to consult on libraries specifically, this has concentrated very much on the library buildings, not on what is the best thing in well, Creekmore's probably an easy one because there is a building with multi purposes, but in Winton, is it actually the library or is it another building that we own and could use? And so I think we've still struggled with that, and I think that's work still to do, probably before we get too deeply into repairing the most difficult libraries, because those buildings are in need. But I know we've commenced that work, and that's important. I think the other bit for me is online resources. And it was something that during COVID we did open up a number of resources that weren't the physical library, but were access to knowledge. And again, for me, the library service isn't just about the libraries themselves; it's about access to information and knowledge and home resources. And when I've tried to access it, inevitably, there's the licenses expire, overused, and you can't get in. So there's something about that which I'd really like to see going forwards. And then the other bit I just wanted to mention is that partly because as cabinet members we are expected to be in lots of different places at the same time. I quite often find myself in libraries doing online meetings, and the library as a resource for people who are on the road. I've done it in Swanage Library, Wimborne Library, and Christchurch Library, and I've sampled the libraries more just as somewhere to perch that's safe and warm, and I can get on the internet to be in meetings when I'm at the other end of the conurbation. So I think that's really important. I've also been approached about a library of stuff and the opportunities to extend what the library does beyond books to things like tools and stuff that people don't actually own or don't need to own themselves, but can just share and have access to briefly. And I think that's, again, part of expanding the service that'd be really important. One concern that I had was at paragraph 118. It talks about the public sector decarbonisation and the removal of gas boilers, and that seems to be in the too difficult pile. It really shouldn't be in the too difficult pile. We've got to break through that and work out how we decarbonise our buildings, all of our buildings, but that includes the library stock. So I was disappointed to see that in there. And the increase in hours, absolutely, and some of the smaller libraries, my own local library, I'd love to use more, but it's only open so little in the week, and the few times I've tried to use it, it tends to be when they're not open. So the open access I would love to see in all the libraries so that we can all make better use of it. And I recognise the financial issues that everyone else has raised about this is our ambition, it's what we want to do, but if the problems with Zen carry on, then we will struggle to deliver the strategy. But thank you, Councillor Martin, for leading this forward, for spearheading it and trying to defend what is a marvellous resource for all of our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just speaking a bit parochially, really, from my ward perspective, as a ward without a library, but a large community, and actually by population probably one of the largest wards in the conurbation now. I support this 5-year strategy, and I think it's quite an achievement to be able to deliver a strategy that's actually looking to improve what we have, keep what we have, and actually make improvements as a strategy over the next 5 years. So I think, considering our financial position and the challenges that we face, I think this is quite an achievement to deliver this strategy and shouldn't be underplayed. But what we need to remember is that our towns are growing and the shape of our towns are changing, and the local plan that's currently sort of working its way through, that's demanding, what is it, 46,000 new homes over the next 15 years. That's 3,000 new homes a year. The shape of our towns is currently changing, and it's going to change even more over the coming years. And so I think as this strategy works through, and hopefully we look forward to the next library strategy following on from 2030, it needs to increasingly take into account the local plan, and the local plan I think needs to also take into account library service provision. Because I live in Bearwood, and that's nearly 2,000 homes were built there, and it had a site of land called the Bearwood Library site, which sat there overgrown for years and years and years, and lots of conversations about what should happen with the Bearwood Library site. And in the end, a library was never funded to be built there, and it was passed over to a housing association to deliver some much needed affordable housing, and we have no library. We had a mobile library van service that came to Bearwood and Merley and Wallistown regularly every couple of weeks, that delivered books and DVDs, and it was a really successful service. But again, that fell with all the austerity cutbacks that was removed by Poole Council back in the day. So actually we've got a large and increasing ward with actually no library service. So people in Bearwood have to travel probably to Kinston. If you're in Merley, you probably travel over the border to Wimborne or down to Broadstone. currently we've had about 500 new homes built in my ward, but there are about another 1,200 which have been permitted and are currently under construction. You drive through my ward and there's construction sites left, right and centre. And actually the call for sites for the next local plan, there could be hundreds or even thousands more homes being built in my ward. And I think we need to really take that on board, that these new communities, and you go around the houses and they're all young families with toddlers and young children. I spent an evening going around knocking on doors in Camphor Paddock, one of the new estates. Every single house I went to had young children under 5. And we're developing these estates and these new homes without easy access to library provision. And actually some of the residents in one of the new estates are actually setting up a shed to store books so that the local families can actually access books on the estate, because there is no library provision. So I'd like to just sort of put out a call for the next library strategy, or towards the end of this library strategy, that starts to really think about that, and the local plan as it works through, that really starts to think about that and about provision of library services for our new communities and our reshaping towns.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other indications to speak on this item? Councillor Burton?
Yeah, I'm wrong button. Yeah, I'm not going to repeat what Councillor Brown said in any way, because of course I'm a ward colleague of his. There's one thing I would add though. Libraries, we was talking about library vans coming round and places to people who borrow books. Libraries are far more than that. Young people need places to go to study, somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, somewhere often away from the home. Libraries provide that opportunity. So I wouldn't like the conversation just to hang on libraries being a place to go and borrow a book. They are far more than that.
I was just thinking of that, Councillor Burton, and I spent a lot of time in Poole Library when I was growing up, but that was because they had a PlayStation. Right, let's move on to, I can't see any other indications to speak on this one. So we will go back to Councillor Martin to sum up before we go to a vote.
Thank you, Leader. Just to pick up a few points. So thank you everybody for your contributions and comments. So Councillor Salmon, it's absolutely not the intention to use open access technology as a way of reducing library hours. And I can't remember who made the point, but our library staff are brilliant and they have so much knowledge. I think perhaps it was Councillor Carr-Brown, I'm not sure. But and so that is not the intention. This is to make sure our libraries can open longer and be more accessible. So, and I think we can probably all agree that our library service our staffing our library service has been salami sliced enough in the last few years. I think we took out 500,000 2 years ago to make the budget the budget balance. To Councillor Hannah's point about finances, and in case the Director of Finances thinks I'm completely ignoring the issue of the financial context, because I didn't mention it in my opening remarks, I think we all recognise the challenges, and this is obviously a priority this is clearly a priority for the whole council. So we just have to make this work, and we have to make the decisions that will safeguard the budget, the library budget, and enable us to deliver this strategy. I would just point out, I think Councillor Hadley mentioned about the Bournemouth PFI. I think I've got my figures right, but the library budget is about 6 million, and of which 1.5 million is the PFI. And if anybody knows how PFIs work, it's not great by any stretch of the imagination. So I think in the context of what libraries deliver, 6 million, or let's say 4.5 million, out of a net revenue budget of 350 million is pretty small. I know we can say that about anything, but I think that context is really important. Councillor Butt noted your point about Creekmore, and happy to come and chat with you about that anytime. I'd like to thank Councillor Carr-Brown, she's still here, because we've had some good conversations about libraries both here and at the magnificent Charminster Library. Friends Group, yes, obviously Councillor Moore knows all about Friends Groups, and I'm hoping we can get more set up and actually make it easier for Friends Groups to be set up in our libraries. Councillor Brown, so let's look at a library strategy that has 25 libraries, shall we? Sorry, Mr. Richards. Yes, and Councillor Burton, they are indeed far more than about books. Funnily enough, I was reading a bit about the author Lee Child, who I'm sure you've all heard of, one of Britain's best-selling authors, and he was talking about libraries quite recently and saying he wouldn't be where he is today without having spent time and being inspired in his local library in Coventry. And I think that goes to Councillor Hadley's point about inspiration. Libraries are places of inspiration as well as everything else. So I just want to wrap up by saying, I think I've covered everything, just by saying that I think this strategy is a really good way forward. I don't want it to end up on a shelf somewhere gathering dust. This council has strategies for everything, and we've got to make sure we deliver this. Delivery is vital, and there are conversations going on about how we do that and why we push for the hubs forward and get the community organisations moving. And equally importantly, and I keep saying this, every directorate of this council needs to play its part in making our libraries even more effective and important in our communities. So thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Okay, we will move to a vote on this one. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you, that's unanimous. So we have already done agenda item 9, which was on the Dorset Let. So we're going to go over to agenda item 10, which is Poole Bay, Poole Harbour and Wareham FSERM strategy review. Councillor Hadley is going to be presenting this report. Is there a councillor who can second this one, please? Thank you, Councillor Herritt. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. So we have a Poole Bay and Poole Harbour and Wareham FSERM strategy in place. It was created 11 years ago. And it's served us well in terms of getting grant and aid for repairs along our sea frontage and harbour frontage. It feels a bit like the Forth Road Bridge. This is our opportunity to refresh that strategy. We have literally just finished the Christchurch Bay strategy to do a similar sort of work from Hainsbury Head in partnership with New Forest District Council to Hurst Castle. But we now need to look again at our pool strategy. And the great bit about this is that we have got funding from the Environment Agency, grant and aid, to pay for this piece of work. Why do we need to do this piece of work? Well, we need to update the models because the world has changed. The climate change is moving at a different rate than was anticipated. The increased storminess and sea level rise. We need to make sure that our models are current and fit for purpose, because again, the teams work to a 100-year timeline, and they're working to how we need to defend the coast and what we can do and what we can afford to do across a very long timeline. So this is an opportunity funded by the Environment Agency, work to be led by our FSERM team in partnership with Dorset Council and the Environment Agency to update the models and to put us in a very good place to be able to look at individual schemes going forwards across that whole frontage. And I guess that's a key part of this. If we don't take this approach now, then there would be a lot more work to do for individual schemes, and that would be more expensive to do piecemeal and less likely to be effective across the whole frontage. So I hope Cabinet can support this as being a good news that it's being funded elsewhere, and that it's really thinking for the future in terms of our cliffs, beaches and harbour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Are there any councillors who are not on Cabinet wishing to speak on this item? No indications. So over to Cabinet. Councillor Herritt.
An opportunity to talk about one of my favourite topics, which is why the beach is 2 metres higher than it was 30 years ago. And that is actually all about protecting the cliffs and protecting the properties, particularly that sit on top of those cliffs, rather than being sandy and lovely for the many visitors to our area, although of course that is a very handy side effect for our residents and for the tourists. But as we've seen this summer, the impact of climate change on our coast is constant and also incredibly expensive. The impact of the 2 cliff slips that we've had, not only do we have to pay to resolve those, but we also have to pay that we also see an impact in the services that we can run, with the land train being restricted this year and cliff lifts not being in that place. So having a strategy, and a funded one at that, means that we have the ability to continue pulling in grants, the kind of refreshment of groins that we're seeing at the moment between the on the beach, and also obviously refreshing the sand as it disappears out into the bay as part of longshore drift. But yeah, just kind of always good to, I think, remind people as to why that sand is so high and why we end up with so much sand on the prom. And that you know, any storm event causes 6 weeks worth of work for our seafront team to clear that, and obviously there's a risk that 3 weeks after that there's another storm and you have to do the 3 weeks again and then another 3 weeks. But yeah, I think an incredibly that team do some really important work for the council. We're really lucky to have them, and hopefully we'll kind of keep seeing some more sand for the time being at least.
Thank you, Councillor Herritt. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this? Nope. Councillor Hadley?
Thank you. Just to sum up, and a slight correction. So the cliff slips, the cliff itself isn't something that we get granted aid for. That's why we have to spend our own money on that. And obviously there's work that Councillor Herritt and I are involved with in trying to steer through resolution of that problem. Our FSM team, Southwest Coastal, are really good at looking for the opportunities and at thinking the whole problem and integrating these things together. So the groin work and the beach replenishment is stuff that we're getting grant and aid from, and this strategy will help us to achieve. But they're also looking at inland flooding and at the stability of the cliffs and the drains that historically weren't well maintained in those cliffs, and all the other work. And they're also working on behalf of other authorities across the southwest, because they're very well regarded by the Environment Agency. So you know, we are really lucky to have that team, and they're doing really good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Okay, so I think we will go to a vote on this one. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendations in the paper? Thank you, that's unanimous. So we'll move on to item number 12, item number 11, which is the BCP Homes Annual Complaints Performance and Service Improvement Plan. Councillor Wilson is going to propose this paper. Who's going to second, please? Councillor Moore, thank you. Over to you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, we could probably take item 12 as well at the same time, because they both went at the same time to overview and scrutiny, environment and place overview and scrutiny, where we had a really good conversation, and it was really, really promising. And I know Chris isn't here, but he said some very complimentary things, which was lovely. And the only like informal recommendation that came out of it is that we should be showing off a bit more. But that's more to do with our performance than anything else. So this first report is around the annual complaints performance and service improvement. So basically, it's providing information on the council's handling of complaints related to the provision of our services. They're covered by the Housing Ombudsman, which sets out how complaints should be dealt with. We've had, over the course of the last year, 164 complaints received. 16% of those were upheld in their entirety, 35% partially, and then 48% not upheld at all. So there were a few areas for improvement that were identified, but there were no findings of non-compliance, and there have been no findings of severe maladministration, which is obviously really a positive thing, and it would be very bad if there was. I think I just point you to paragraph 18 in the report, where there's been a list of service improvements that we've made as a result of learning from complaints. We don't have, when you consider that we have 10,000 homes thereabouts that we look after, 164 complaints isn't a huge amount, but it's important that we learn from each and every single one of them, even the ones that are not upheld. So within paragraph 18, there is a list of service improvements that we've made as a result. And I think it's also important to highlight that actually we've received 330 compliments as well, which is obviously nearly double the amount of complaints. And I don't know how many services within the council can probably claim that. So I think that's also something really positive to highlight. So yeah, happy to put forward this first report's recommendations as set out.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm going to see if anyone outside of Cabinet wishes to speak on this item. Can't see any indication. Anyone on Cabinet? Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Well, as you can see from the report, some complaints from residents do reach the Ombudsman, and some are supported, but as we've heard, hopefully staff are then able to learn from them. I do have a number of properties in my ward which are managed by BCP Homes, and residents often copy me in on their complaints and concerns, and I always follow them through. But I have to say, BCP Homes respond very quickly, and in my experience, always do their best to try to resolve the matters raised. And sometimes they have to deal with some very tricky and complex situations. So I've got no real concern as to the way complaints have been dealt with. And I've actually been sometimes impressed by this service to my residents. So I am happy to support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Anyone else wishing to speak on this one? Councillor Wilson, anything to add?
No, nothing. Happy to put forward.
Okay, so we'll go to a vote on this one. All those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you, that is unanimous. And straight on to item 12, so back to you, Councillor Wilson, which is on BCP Homes performance update, and I'm going to be seconding this one, so over to you.
Thank you for that, Chair. Yes, so again, this is went to Environment and Place overview and scrutiny, and again, really positive things said about it. I think the only kind of issue we spoke about was around our read-out times and our voids, and that's something that we're doing a lot of work to try and address. But the purpose of the report is to provide oversight for both us as a cabinet and also a council around the work we're doing. We've started measuring our tenant satisfaction measures, so the really important measures that the regulator have set out quarterly. So we have like more real time and live data around what our residents are feeling, because that's really important. Formally, and in other local authorities, they're reviewed annually. There's a figure that kind of stays there for the whole year, and I think we've seen that in other areas of the council in terms of corporate performance management. You want to try and, as best as you can, know what's going on in the moment, so you can try and address it. So it's really positive that we started doing that. However, there has been a slight fall in the first quarter on our very high levels of satisfaction that we had at our annual figure, but we're still across repairs and other measures related to repairs and maintenance within the top quartile, so that's really positive. And satisfaction with antisocial behaviour and how it's managed has also increased. Yes, so again, really positive. If anyone has any questions or comments, happy to take them. It was remiss of me to have not mentioned over the course of the two reports as well, that last week we did have the regulator of social housing in for inspection. They visited on site for 2 days and spoke to both myself, Kelly Dean, the Director of Housing, and the leader and the Chief Executive, and it was a really positive experience. I think regulation is so important for the sector in social housing. It's something that's been long overdue, to be honest, and it's really good to see it come in. And it's been a really positive process in terms of co-regulation, in terms of working with the regulator to make sure that we're getting the best outcomes for our tenants. So yes, and hopefully you'll be hearing more of me in the coming months, because we're wanting to take more stuff through council, through the cabinet process, in order to give. I mean, I said to the regulators last week, my ideal is that 76 councillors know what's going on in BCP Homes. I think that's really important, because it is such an important service that we provide. You know, it's 10,000 homes, like double that in terms of residents. It's a huge thing, and we really do need to have oversight as councillors, I think. So yeah, happy to put forward as set out. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anyone not on Cabinet want to speak on this item? Nope. Anyone on Cabinet wishing to speak? Councillor Hadley?
Thank you. Yes, I think, well, from my perspective as ward councillor, I have quite a lot of social housing in my ward, and you know, the impression I get is that we are a good landlord. I have more problems with some of the social housing that isn't ours, unfortunately, in terms of things that don't get resolved quickly. And I think, you know, it's a great job, Kieran, and in terms of making it work and keeping it going, and meeting the needs of our tenants, which is a really important thing. So thank you to you and the team.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. I was also just going to add to this one about the, firstly, the importance of council homes. So 10,000 homes is not, you know, with the largest provider of social housing in our conurbation. And we know that the people living in those homes are people who have had a needs assessment, who need to have a social home. And I think that it's a really positive thing that we do as a council, and we're obviously always looking for new ways in which we can create more social homes, whether we build them ourselves or we buy them and use them that way. But I'm really proud as a council we do have an HRA, because I often get people who, other councillors, other council leaders who will talk to me about ours, very jealous of the fact that we are delivering such an important service for residents. The other thing I was just going to mention is the importance of us as Cabinet, but also the whole council, taking an in-depth look at these statistics that we have, not just from the tenant satisfaction ratings, but also particularly relating to things like health and safety, so fire, gas and electric, and the other standards which are really important that we are compliant with. And I think as a council, as BCP Homes has done a really good job in meeting those levels. I was reading about other councils, and one in particular had, which I was reading about, had a very high satisfaction level. So over something like 90% of residents were very satisfied with the service that they got. However, 20% of their homes were not meeting the decent home standard. And we hear about other councils who are in similar positions where they are not meeting that standard. I'm really proud that we are, but that's what I use to demonstrate that it's not just about the satisfaction level. It's also about whether we're providing safe, quality homes and a really good standard of service for those people living in them. And I'm really pleased as well that this will become part of the future performance reporting, and BCP Homes will be integrated into that performance framework, because I think environment and place overview and scrutiny were right. We don't talk about it enough. I think our culture as a council is sometimes we've still got that mindset of our social homes being run by an external organisation or an arm's length organisation, whereas this is fully part of the council. And I think as a councillor who's also got lots of social housing, it is so much easier to go straight to officers when there's a problem. And actually, I see fewer problems, and I'd agree with Councillor Hadley. A lot of the issues that I get from ward residents are actually from the other RPs rather than us as a council. So I'll go back to you, Councillor Wilson, if you've got anything to add.
Not particularly, just to agree with everything that both yourself and Councillor Hadley have said. Really kind words, Councillor Hadley. I think it, like you say, it's such an important service that we provide. I firmly believe that housing of any tenure is the foundation on which we all build our lives, and we often take for granted. But particularly social housing is such an important role to play, as you say. So yeah, really happy to put forward the recommendations as set out.
Thank you. Right, so can we take a vote on this item? All those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you, that's unanimous. And agenda item 13, so back to you, Councillor Wilson again, which is the BCP Homes Governance Review, Residents Engagement and Communication Strategy, and the Engagement for High-Rise Building Strategy. Over to you.
Thank you. My first hat trick at Cabinet. So, is there a match ball to take home? I don't know. Yes. So this was one of the papers that wasn't taken through environment and place overview and scrutiny, but is really important. And you know, it would have all. There's only so many hours in the day, but it obviously would have been good if it was scrutinised as well. So yeah, it's focusing on our governance arrangements in terms of both as a organisation, BCP Homes, but also in the context of the council. Its aim is to ensure that there is strong oversight from councillors from the delivery of services. I think there is like a vast passion for this amongst some councillors, but again, just to emphasise, I want all 76 kind of having a bit of an interest in this. So the governance review was carried out with input from an independent consultant, and it seeks to improve the governance by enhancing the role of BCP Homes Advisory Board, and developing a formalised assurance framework and improving communication and feedback mechanisms. The review makes a number of recommendations. I'm not going to read them all, but I'm going to pick out a few that I think are quite important. So strengthening the governance, integration and oversight, as I've just said, further embedding the advisory board within the council's governance structure. It's a really good mechanism, the advisory board. We have tenants, we have opposition councillors, we have independent members with expertise in the sector, and it's a really positive meeting. And one of the first things I actually did when I was portfolio holder is I asked that the papers be put on Modern Gov so that councillors can access them. So the papers are all there, but I think there's also maybe potentially going further and making them accessible to the public as well. I think that's an important thing, because I'm sure there's some of our council tenants will be interested in those meetings. Enhancing resident engagement and influence. So again, developing a comprehensive resident engagement strategy, which is actually attached in the appendices. That empowers tenants and leaseholders to shape services and policies. And actually, we've had some informal feedback from the regulator already, and they were actually really impressed with our resident engagement. And the residents had fed back to them that they do feel like they make a difference currently, which was really warming to see. Improving communication and feedback mechanisms. I think that's really important. It touched a bit on the informal environment and place recommendation to show off a bit more. I don't think we kind of always tell people what's going on enough. So establishing a two-way communication between the advisory board, resident committees, panels, and the wider resident community, really important. And then finally, of the ones that I'm highlighting, the enhanced use of data and insight to enhance and inform our strategy and policy going forward. I think, again, it's an area we've really improved in the last couple of years, but there's always more that we can do to go further. And the implementation of a new housing management system in 2026 will help us get there. So yes, again, happy to put this report forward as the recommendation set out. It does also include a 3-year resident engagement strategy and a resident engagement strategy for high-rise buildings. So I recommend reading them if you haven't. I'm sure you have. But yes, happy to put forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any councillors not on Cabinet wanting to speak? I can't see any councillors on Cabinet wishing to speak on this item. Councillor Hadley?
Thank you, Leader. Just to, you didn't ask for a seconder, and I'm happy to second this paper. But part of that is because of particularly the high-rise buildings, because I have 6 tower blocks in my ward, and particularly with Project Admiral, where we refurbished 4 of them, and the Sturt blocks work where we refurbished 2 of them. Both of those were far more protracted than were originally intended because of problems with the supply of the materials. And I know the team worked really hard on consultation with residents, but I also got involved because they were getting really upset. And I think the other part of that, obviously with high rises, is where we where people take on a lease, so they're no longer our tenants. They own the property. That becomes rather more entangled and complicated, and the strategy includes those leaseholders in those buildings, because clearly we can't detach the building and ignore it. So we've got to work with them, and that was again a complexity during that work. So it's really important. That's not just about tenants, it's also about leaseholders, and that's in the paper, which I welcome, and I think is a good piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. And I was just going to mention as well the importance of residents' voice within the future of BCP Homes, and empowering residents to really shape the service that they want to have from us as a council. And I think the paper has a few examples of how residents have been able to input. I did also just want to thank Councillor Wilson for chairing the advisory board as well, because I think it's really important as BCP Homes now, where it wasn't in the past, is part of the council in the fullest sense, integrating that into our own governance frameworks and ensuring that it is a area of the council that is democratic, I think is really important. And I think that Councillor Wilson has really pushed forward that ability of Cabinet to get involved really in the work of BCP Homes and for wider councillors as well, so that they are not just cited but can go and visit the housing schemes in their area, for example, and also engage with residents in a much more meaningful way. Councillor Wilson, anything to add?
Not on this report, but I am going to just take an opportunity to just thank everybody that was involved in the inspection last week. You know, Matty, who's in the room, Kelly Dean, who's not here, Seamus, who's online, and all of the wider team. I think it was really, really, really positive experience. I think it was we had an informal feedback session, and it was just really lovely to hear some of the stuff that was being said. We await the grading in January. Conscious of the fact that only 4 local authorities, I think, currently have the top grade. But obviously, we would be keen to get that. But you know, we're aspiring to that. But conscious that it's a difficult grade to get. And I think also thanking yourself, leader, and chief executive. You know, in local authorities that have got that grade, it's been local authorities where there's that buy-in from the top, from the leadership, and that was absolutely clear to see during the course of the inspection and throughout my time as portfolio holder. The conversations that we're always having, Councillor Earl, around BCP Homes, you know, it's clear that your passion is probably on a par with mine. So yeah, just to thank everyone really, and happy to then talk about the report and put that forward as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Okay, so can I see all those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you, that's unanimous. So we'll move on to agenda item 14, which is the Vehicles and Plant Replacement Building Maintenance and Construction Works team. Councillor Hadley is going to be presenting this one today, and I'm very happy to second. Councillor Hadley, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Well, I'm seconding this. I'm proposing this because Councillor Cox had to leave the meeting, so I hadn't done a lot of preparation, although I have read the paper. And this is about 21 vehicles that are used by the teams that support the great work that we do in our BCP Homes largely, but also other things as well in construction. We currently tend to rent vehicles on a long-term rental basis. I've always wondered why we did that. You know, seen rented vehicles with our logos on the side. And I think this is about giving a better basis, better footing, more economy. I know the work that Mark and the team that manage the fleet do some very careful work about trying to make sure we get the best out of our vehicles. When you lease vehicles, you end up paying more per year for the vehicle, and you don't get the absolute maximum out of it. So I welcome this report, and that includes where we can, looking at electrifying the fleet. Depending on the charging infrastructure, we are putting in more charging infrastructure, but it also depends on where home is for that vehicle as to whether that's in place. And also some of the vehicles are construction vehicles for which it wouldn't be appropriate at this time. But it's a plan to try and make sure that we are getting the best out of our vehicle fleet, supporting our teams with modern equipment. And there has been, as part of the work, they have had to make some purchases under urgent powers because of health and safety concerns about the old kit, and doing their best to make sure that we're getting sometimes nearly new kit rather than brand new vehicles in order to again maximise the value for spend.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Anyone not on Cabinet wanting to speak on this item? Can't see anyone. Anyone on Cabinet? I was just going to mention a interest that probably should have been declared earlier, which is being a director for Seascape Limited, and that is mentioned within the report. So I just want to put that out there now and record it for the minutes. Okay, so can I see all? Oh, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I should probably declare the same interests. I'm part of Seascape Homes, Seascape, and BBML. So yes, if that could be.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Okay, so can I see all those in favour of the recommendations, please? Thank you. That is unanimous. Right, so on to item number 15, which is the Adult Social Care Prevention Strategy. Councillor Brown is going to be presenting this one. Is anyone going to second, please? Councillor Moore, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm really pleased to present this strategy, which has been developed over many, many months. So just as a brief summary, basically it's a 5-year strategy from 2025 to 2030, setting out 5 key strategic priorities to reduce, delay or prevent the need for long-term care and support for people living in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. It's been shaped through a lot of consultation by the views and experiences of local people and carers and the voluntary and community sector partners, and aims to deliver and develop a sustainable approach to prevention in adult social care. It emphasises early intervention, the promotion of wellbeing, collaboration of key partners to not only prevent the development of long-term care needs, but also to enhance the quality of life for people living in the BCP Council area. So, and I'd like to thank all the teams and the staff that have worked on this extensively over many, many months. The detailed strategy is in Appendix 1, and there's also a very, very detailed action plan given within the report. So what's adult social care prevention actually about? Well, I think we're all familiar with sort of prevention in other parts of our lives. And in particularly if you think about the emergency services, you know, police and crime, we're all used to crime prevention. You know, when we have a house, we might have a burglar alarm, we have keys and locks, we have keys for our cars. You know, it's sort of second nature actually about crime prevention and about what we do. And that's been taken decades, you know, for the sort of the police and crime bodies to sort of make sure that that's just second nature for the population to think about crime prevention and protecting our homes and property. And the same with fire safety, you know, that fire prevention, you know, we've all got smoke alarms in our homes. There's electrical safety legislation to make sure that our wiring's all safe and secure, and lots of documentation and bureaucracy that goes with that. And it's fire escapes on buildings, all of that kind of prevention to prevent deaths or injuries from fire. That's second nature now after decades and decades, and it's just something that happens. And this is the same really for the sort of health and care sector to me, that actually it's a generational shift, that actually making people think about prevention within their own personal health and their care needs. And it's done quite extensively already, but this is a real sort of formal approach to making sure that it's delivered. And it's actually quite in tune. Government have launched their 10-year plan for the health service. And one of those key elements of the 10-year health service plan is to move from funding sickness to prevention. So rather than actually just treating people in hospital when they're ill, is actually getting ahead of the curve and actually making sure that we prevent people getting ill in the first place and needing the support from the health service. So what we're doing here in terms of our own care provision is very much in tune with the government's thinking. As I say, there's been extensive engagement. There's been a lot of survey responses to inform this strategy. There's been events and conferences. 30 voluntary and community sector organisations have been engaged in helping develop this strategy. And I actually spoke at a multi-partner prevention event with over 100 people in attendance. And what became clear to me is that prevention is something that our social workers and occupational therapists already do day to day as part of their work. But this is very much sort of actually putting a strategy around that and making sure we sort of intentionally do these things as opposed to just being part of our day-to-day work. And our health colleagues already do this within the health service, and voluntary and community sector organisations already do this, but this is very much making sure we structure it and do it intentionally. I'm also pleased that the Health and Adult Social Care Review and Scrutiny Committee have considered this report in detail and were very supportive of it, albeit at that time there wasn't the the financial sort of budgetary support for it, and that's been developed over a number of weeks since the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I wanted to just sort of bring it to life a bit for people. So when you say, well, what actually is this money going to do? Because I'd be grateful if Cabinet can support the funding for this strategy. I'll just give a couple of examples and what within adult social care we call stories of difference. So we fund the Prima Life Urgent Community Response Scheme. So Dorset Healthcare already deliver an urgent community response as our health colleagues that provides 2-hour crisis response to support people in their own homes to avoid hospital admission following a phone call to 111 or a 999 call. So Dorset Healthcare do that from the health side, and that hopefully can prevent an admission to hospital. We then commissioned Prima Life to develop a support scheme that follows on from that to ensure those people are recovering well at home. So they make phone calls to support them, to make sure that they're doing the exercises that they need to do, and that they're sort of engaging with the right people. And I've got examples of a 90-year-old lady who was visited after a fall at home, and then our Prima Life team have been contacting her, and it turned out she was quite lonely at home, so they've linked her into a weekly telephone befriending group, which she actually calls every week, and she really looks forward to now. And all of that activity is really helping her stay home and independent at home, where she wants to be, rather than having to consider moving into long-term residential care. And just a second example I wanted to give was the BCP handy van service. So quite a few of you might have seen our handy van, which is currently funded, but the funding for that is due to end at the end of this financial year. So one of the requests here is that we provide the funding to make sure that service and others can continue after next March. So the handy van service has been commissioned by BCP to support people to live independently in their own homes for longer, and provides minor repairs and household tasks for free for people who are over the age of 60 or have a disability or long-term condition and are in receipt of certain benefits. So people who use the service just have to cover the cost of the materials. So there's an example here about a lady who has been a regular service unit since the beginning of the handy van scheme. She has had support on various things at home, such as putting up curtains and blinds, fixing a bed, fitting a video doorbell, moving a fridge, a washing machine. And that has enabled her to continue living at home independently and safely. And she was considering having to move into a care facility, either extra care or long-term care provision. But because of that, and because she's now confident that she's got a professional person coming around and helping her do those sorts of jobs, and it's more than that, because actually on one of those visits last winter, the tradesman visiting found her wrapped in a coat and a woolly hat at home, and actually she'd been referred to Bridgewater Energy previously, so the handyman informed the management, and they followed up the referral, and then he took a heated throw around to her as well. So it's actually not just a tradesman going to do a job, it's actually somebody's keeping an eye on these people and making sure that they are safe and cared for at home. So it's much more than just a sort of repair service. So in terms of the financial ask that we've got, in the reports, it notes that the Local Government Association have done a report that highlights that early support and prevention can save councils £3.17 for every £1 that they invest in those prevention services. I think that's really important to remember. So the request we've got here in in recommendation B. So recommendation B is to ask for an investment of £203,000 ongoing funding from our revenue budgets for the adult social care prevention strategy to counteract the effect of temporary funding not being available from next April and protect the current level of service delivery. And that includes that BCP handy van as one of the examples of what's funded from that. And secondly is to request £147,000 per annum for the next 3-year period, so a total of £441,000 to be drawn down via flexible use of capital receipts to increase the total adult social care prevention strategy envelope to the required level. And it includes in the report there the forecast savings that will result from that. So ultimately, within a few years, by about 2030, it's forecast that we'll be saving over £1 million a year because of that investment, because of managing the demand that we've got for our care services. We all know that adult social care is a statutory service. We all know that demographics are meaning that the demand for that is going up and up every year. And so our response, rather than sitting back and saying, well, we just need to find more money to fund this additional demand, is actually, let's get ahead of the curve. Let's do this prevention strategy. Let's invest and manage that pressure that we know that is coming down the line. So That's really why the strategy's been put together. That's why we're requesting Cabinet approve the funds for it, because we know that it makes sense. And the lovely thing for me about this is that actually it's one of those occasions when we're asking for investment by the council, which will provide great services for residents that are really valued, like the handyman service and other things. So helpful for residents. It really supports them. There's some quite innovative schemes within the plan, and actually at the same time is good for the council's finances at the same time. So why would we not do it? Because it's going to take that pressure away from the future. So I'd just like to ask all members to support the financial ask that we've got within the report, and assure you that it's going to really deliver for us in the future by taking away the pressure on our care services.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. So this item was considered at Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm just going to see if Councillor Canavan would like to come in on this one.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Chair. You'll see from the papers that there is a recommendation from the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee which supports the recommendations in the paper. And I just want to support what Councillor Brown's just said in relation to the money. You know, I'm quite relaxed about always asking the council to spend more money, but I wouldn't do it if I didn't think we could deliver what this is set out to deliver. It's great from my point of view to be able to have the confidence that I know we can do this stuff. You know, that's what I wanted to say in terms of support. The one thing I just wanted to add though is the pressure on us as a council in terms of long-term care is huge. We looked at this in the run-up to the last budget, and the amount of money that we're spending is pretty eye-watering. And I probably would support the point that Councillor Moore made earlier on. I'm not sure council tax was ever designed to support this kind of spending or service, but that's kind of where we are. But that pressure is not going away. In fact, if anything, it's getting worse. It's increasing. And what's I think particularly concerning is that the pressure is particularly coming from those who are presenting with more complex needs, and that in itself is another pressure on the service. So I guess I just wanted to reassure Cabinet that, you know, we from the point of view of the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee, you know, it's not that we're just letting you make these decisions and ignoring it. You know, we will be coming back to it to make sure that actually it's delivered what it says on the tin, and that we will ensure that we do that. For me, it's about how do we drive down those pressures, and this is just one thing I think that we can do, significant as it is, but one thing that we can do to try and help drive down those pressures and hopefully save us some money over time. You know, it's not instant, but it will be effective over time. So just to add my support, Chair, thank you very much, and to thank Councillor Brown for his explanation of what's going on in the background, because it's a massive amount of work, and we've got a very good team that's delivering it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Are there any councillors who are not on Cabinet who wish to speak on this item? Can't see any indications. So over to Cabinet. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Leader. Can I just thank Councillor Brown for including some studies, case studies in his presentation, because I think talking about our residents' lives and the problems some elderly residents are experiencing does actually bring the purpose of this paper to life. So thanks for that. Because we all know we are facing increased demand for adult social care services because our local population is living longer, which is good, but not everyone over 65 enjoys good health. So clearly there is an obvious need for a prevention strategy to manage this increased demand for services. And obviously funding this strategy is going to be a challenge given the financial situation. So I am happy to support the recommendations A, B and C as listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Anyone else wishing to speak on this? I can't see any indications. So, Councillor Brown, would you like to sum up or add anything at this point?
No, just thank you for the comments. And yeah, I think if you look in the actual strategy report, there's those examples I gave were just a couple of small examples of the sort of work that's going on. But there's dozens and dozens of different sort of areas. Particularly one of the areas, particularly we work with the health services around falls prevention. And a lot of you will know that there's a lot of elderly people in our communities and that experience falls at home or in the street, and that creates a burden on the health service and ultimately on care. That could be the start of the sort of the slippery slope to ending up in a residential care placement or nursing home. And actually by getting in ahead of the curve in terms of falls prevention. And I've been really impressed at some of the technology that is used now that can detect people's locations within their homes and track them and all the kind of technology to make sure that the people that they're aware of when people might be suffering a fall and monitoring their blood pressure and all those sorts of things. Actually, there's a lot of technological solutions that are actually really helping to to address a lot of these things within people's homes and keep them safe at home. So yeah, those are just a few examples, but there's loads and loads of really good positive work that helps our individuals and particularly elderly individuals and those with care needs within our communities. And this is going to be good for the council's finances as well. So purely on a financial basis, I'd support it, but actually knowing the real good it does for so many people across our communities is a bonus. So.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. So let's have a vote on this one. All those in favour of the recommendation set out in the paper? Thank you. That's unanimous. So agenda item 16 is urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with the Constitution. Chief Executive Aidan Dunn. Aidan, anything to report?
Nothing to report.
Thank you, Aidan. Agenda item 17 is the Cabinet Forward Plan, and there is a copy of this which is attached to the agenda for this meeting, and it has been published online, so anyone can go and have a look at what is coming up for Cabinet over the next few months. And all that's left for me to do is to close the meeting. I just want to thank all those who have contributed, being here in person and online. And the next Cabinet meeting will be on the 26th of November. So thank you, everyone, and I will now close the meeting.